Well, there it is. Hi guys, I just got back from the cinema seeing Warcraft The Beginning, the movie, over at Odeon in my area, and wow, it went fast and it was enjoyable. I'm going to get into spoilers a little bit later, but I will give you the first up experience that I had right now, and that's going to be minus the spoilers, so you might want to gauge my impression just to sort of see whether you should go and see it. Are you a fan of Warcraft? You should probably go see this film. Are you not a fan of Warcraft, but you like Lord of the Rings and other movies like that? You should probably go see this film. Are you not a fan of Warcraft and not a fan of Lord of the Rings? Probably shouldn't go and see this film, because it might not necessarily appeal to you if neither of those two can appeal to you, because those two are very important aspects, and the movie does take from that sort of genre quite heavily. And it does so in a really, really fantastic way. I did thoroughly enjoy it. The effects were great. The music, the atmosphere, the lighting, the practical stuff was also great, considering how much of the movie was heavily CGI'd. You kind of passively know it's CGI. It's very hard to fool the human eye, but at the same time, you go with it because it is done very well, considering today's standards. It's pretty impressive. And the costume design, the armor is fantastic, as realistic as one can be with human proportions. If you were, as it was discussed in previous sort of discussions before with Warcraft and Duncan Jones and all that, if they were to actually give like humans the actual armor that people wear in World of Warcraft and such, you would be walking around like a hunchback, because it would just be crushing you down. So the armor that they had to sort of like compensate was really well done, and there was multiple shots of this armory room which just showed off all of these shields, spears, halberds, swords, you name it. It was all in there, and it was like just such a joy to see that. Alright, so first impressions, very good. Probably you should go watch it, especially if you're watching this. You may as well go and watch it, because it already shows that you're garnishing some sort of interest in the film. So I'm impressed with it. I think it's very good, and I implore you to go and see it as well if you do like Warcraft and that whole sort of like medieval style sword and sorcery kind of genre. You will get something out of this film. Now, let's get into well, actually, let's talk a little bit about my experience. It wasn't too eventful, thankfully. It was pretty smooth going. I got in there. The cinema this is the first showing of Warcraft for my area. And it was, I would say probably, if I was to take everyone in there and then sort of like round up all the seats that were included, I'd say it was a third full. But it was obviously people were spread out to make it look like it's more half full. But if I was being more logical and accurate, I would say it's probably about a third full, which is pretty reasonable, to be fair, considering it's Warcraft movie. And most of the time when I've gone to the cinema in my area, which isn't that often, but when I do, it's very quiet anyway. I've never been in there where it's been packed or anything like that for a particular movie, but I don't go often enough to gauge that properly. So I would have to assume that this wouldn't have as many people watching it as normal. I think being Bank Holiday Monday does help, because there's a lot of people in town. So some people might be in town going, oh, let's go watch a movie. Oh, what movies are on at the moment? This Warcraft movie's on 12 o'clock. When's the next movie? 1 o'clock? Oh, let's just go watch this Warcraft. You can imagine there's some people that are in that, because I'm not sure whether everyone there that was there to watch Warcraft because they love the game and the Blizzard and the memories. I'm not sure if I could speak for that. I didn't exactly speak to anyone there. I'd say, hey mate, why are you here? Have you got a good reason to be here? Did you like the Warcraft games? You better have done, otherwise get out. No, it wasn't like that. But, my God, people just can't stop fucking using phones. I'm sorry for my language, I'll try and keep that down. But, yeah, that happened quite a bit. Now, I'm partly putting that down to them necessarily being a little bit bored by the movie or something. I think it's mostly whenever they got a message, they would go, oh, there's a message on my phone telling me about this new accessory that someone's put in their hair. Fantastic. Beep, 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 beep. Okay, back to the movie. So, yeah, there's a girl on the left of me who just did that like 4 or 5 times at least. I suppose over a whole hour and 50-minute film. It's not too bad, but it's kind of annoying. And then it looked like there was a guy who was on his phone the entire film. To the right of me, further down the alley, he wasn't. He just had a sweet packet wrapper which had a foil inside, and it was somewhat reflective. So from my peripheral vision, it looked like he was on his phone the entire time because it was slightly like luminous and shiny. But I could sort of phase those two things out. They did take me out of the movie a little bit from time to time, but I managed to phase them out. As for the two people in front of me, they were well behaved, but I thought I was going to get off to a much rockier start with the guy in front. Luckily, it was a lady in front of me and then a guy to her left. And the guy was wearing a baseball cap. I was like, why the hell are you wearing a baseball cap? You're now inside. Thankfully, he remembered this. So he took his baseball cap off before the film started. One of the slight issues is that because he had the baseball cap on, it made his hair a little bit fluffy. And it was sticking up. And part of me wanted to just lick my tongue and just sort of like knock it down a little bit. Just squash that hair down because it was sticking up just a little bit, so it was in the bottom left of my vision of the movie. But I just had to sit up a little bit straighter just to get that out of the way. I was in better seats, but I say better, I'm not so sure. There's 3 rows of seats where you're on a higher plane, so to speak, but I was in the middle of those 3, and the ones in front have a much bigger gap between the ones that are the standard seats. So I think those are the ones you should be sitting in. If you would next time, if you do go, if I say, I'm more or less saying this to myself, if I do go to see it again and I do go for the extra quid seats for a better experience or whatever, probably go for the ones in the front or the ones in the very back, not in the middle, because the ones in the middle weren't really that much higher where I was sitting than the ones in front of me, because the people, I could see them pretty much at the bottom of the screen. Luckily, if I sat up tall enough, they weren't too much of a problem, but I could see from their angle that the seats in front of them were much lower down, and the seats behind me were much higher up. So that kind of bugs me a little bit, but it wasn't that big a deal after all. So that's a little niggle there, here and there, of my cinema experience. I always think it's a bit fun to start off with something like that. Just let me know about your experiences as well if you went to go see the cinema. It's always fun to hear like people getting bugged about little things. It's just we like to complain about stuff, and it's fun. Right. Now, back to the movie. Let me see. I've literally just watched it, and I'm going to try and record as much of it as I can, because I've just got back now, and I'm starting to record this video. So let's start off with the very basics. I went to go see it at 12. You get 25 minutes of adverts. It started at 12:25. It finished at 2:15 p.m. So that's an hour and 50 minutes. So it's short-ish, but not really that short. It's basically 2 hours for the most part, it was fine because it went bloody quick. Now, I would say anything from now on, by the way, is spoilers, in case it wasn't already kind of spoilers before. So if you're worried about spoilers, stop the video now. Maybe put a little thumbs up if you like on your way out, and go enjoy the movie. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about the story, the plot, and that kind of stuff. So for those of you that are familiar with Warcraft, you might know about the whole deal with the orcs having to escape their planet, and Jaden's coming after them, or rather the Burning Legion in some way or shape and form, and Gul'dan and Medivh are sort of like responsible for opening up the portals to allow the orcs to escape from their world to come into the human world to conquer it, and it turns out it's a little bit more difficult to do so than the orcs had anticipated, so forth and so forth, and that's the general story, and that's why the orcs are kind of up in our grill as the humans. We're like, what's going on here? Hey guys, like, we've had peace for a long time. What's the matter? And that's the general story. So let's see, right from the very start. It's going to be hard to recall everything because there was quite a lot, but I'll try to recall. What I probably will do is more of the more memorable things and go from there. So let's see, right from the very start, you've got this cool homage, I would say, to Warcraft 3, strangely enough, and this is very heavily based on the Warcraft 1 story. Most of it is intact, but some bits are different to the original canon story. I'm sure some people might complain about that, but it was good enough that it was close enough that I could go, yeah, this is Warcraft 1 enough. Do you know what I mean? But the start of it is this human on this kind of like orcish world by the looks of it, and he's picking up the shield and his sword, and he bashes it together, and in the distance is this orc psyching himself up for the fight, and they're at staring each other down, and then you get this narration saying, I can't remember what the narration basically said now, because it was right at the start of the movie, and that was like 2.5 hours ago, but it was basically this kind of, we've been at war for a long time now. So I assume that this scene that they're showing us is actually somewhat in the future, I had to assume. And it's kind of like what the film leads up to, you actually sort of see right at the very start. And yeah, I can't really remember what... Oh yeah, no, it didn't work out too well from the human, from what it seemed. It looked like the orc kind of crushed him, but you don't technically get to see any of that. But it's just this kind of like this feel of the Warcraft 3 opening cinematic of the human versus the orc, and then they're sort of like staring each other down, and there's a little bit of cinematic sort of narration. We never paid any heed to the ancient prophecies. Like fools, we clung to the ancient hatreds. I love that sort of like, oh, gives me tingles. If you ever listen to the Warcraft 3 opening cinematic, just listen to it. It's so good. His voice is just epic. But anyway, then it goes into the Warcraft logo, and I kind of forget now where the whole film goes, because there's just so much of it jumbled up now. There's so many memorable moments, so... Let me try and think. Alright, so you got the orcs. Gul'dan's basically getting the orcs out of Draenor. You don't really get to see anything regarding Kil'jaeden sort of like pressuring the Draenei or anything like that and getting them to escape. So you don't see the orcs destroying Shattrath. You only see a tiny bit of the Draenei, to be honest, or... You might call them... No, they are Draenei in this, because technically they're Eredar before, but they're Draenei when they're exiled, and they're exiled because they're on the planet. So it doesn't really explain where they came from, what they're doing there, but Gul'dan uses them to power up the portal. And what he's been doing is he's been sort of like pushing orc forces into the human homeland, I have to assume, time and time again. He uses the life force with Vel energy from the Draenei, or any sort of like corpses, not corpses, live beings nearby, to just power up the portal and then send the orc troops in. And that causes the orcs to... All the clans are together, basically. They have mentions to Blackrock clan, Frostwolf clan, that kind of stuff, and they're all banding up together to get off Draenor and go into the human world and basically, you know, take out the humans. Not necessarily because they got an agenda against the humans, just they want to take over the world, because they want it for themselves, all the resources and stuff. And the Frostwolf clan is your Durotan, your Orgrimmar, and Orgrim, Doomhammer rather. And yeah, they're sort of like with the orcs, but they don't agree with their methods. They just want to sort of like want a place to stay, to live, to carry on in life. But the other orcs, like Gul'dan, Blackhand, who's Gul'dan's sort of like first hand, if you will, first officer kind of thing, they sort of like obviously want to destroy a bit more and corrupt everything and take it for themselves. So you have this kind of conflict between the humans and the orcs, and they're sort of like trying to work out which orcs are trustworthy, which ones aren't. So they have this meeting between the Frostwolves and the humans. You've got Khadgar, who is basically this kind of apprentice mage who has been learning from Medivh, who is... like in Warcraft 1, and they did it slightly differently. He's technically corrupt, but you don't really know that at the very start, but he's got Sargeras inside of him. And he sort of like seems to be working with the humans a lot of the time, helping them out versus the orcs that keep invading, but eventually he actually ends up working with Gul'dan to open up another portal, which really leads to a huge orc invasion later on in the film. So, getting a little bit jumbled up here. I suppose I'll just talk a little bit about Garona. I enjoyed her character. It wasn't as lovey-dovey as I assumed it was going to be from the trailers. I thought, oh, this is going to be some, you know, fist ham sort of like a love story plot that they'll just sort of like squeeze in here just so they can have it for the girls to enjoy or something like that. She was a strong character, and she made her point throughout the film, and I thoroughly enjoyed her character. Lothar was great. Travis Fimmel, I think, plays him. He did a great job throughout the film. Sort of like had this charm and comedy feel to it without being comedic, if you know what I mean. It was just kind of like these quips and the timing, the looks that he gave, sort of like gave you that comedic feel without it being sort of like slapstick or anything like that when things were happening. Blackhand, played by Clancy Brown, I believe, was very badass. He's got his 2 dragon sort of like shoulder plates. So it's like dragon skulls. And then when you see the back of him, it's the dragon's spine going all the way down. So it's like this cape. And he stayed true. But he was kind of conflicted. He wasn't as sort of like single-mindedly brutish as you might have believed him to be. He was for the most part, but unlike the fact that they gave him a little bit of depth, they could have easily just said he's a one-track mind guy, only there to kill. There were moments where he had sort of like conversations and such with Durotan where he gives him a bit more of a chance to sort of like for the sake of his son and stuff like that, and he had these conflictions with Gul'dan rather than just flat out following Gul'dan no matter what he said. They had this mock Garak, I believe is the term, although I might have got that wrong, which is a fight to the death, basically. It's an orc tradition, and you have to, if someone challenges you or something like that, then you have to sort of like either kill them or they kill you, that kind of thing. And yeah, they had that quite a few times in the film, actually. I really liked Durotan as well. He had a strong head on his shoulders, you know, he was just a solid kind of like character that felt like you needed him for the orcs to feel like a grounded race. There was more depth to them, so they did the right thing there, because instead of just telling the story from the human side, they told it from the orc side and the human side. So that way you had Durotan telling that story, and he was a likable enough character that you felt for him and what he was going through. Draco was his wife. She was fine. She was only in a sort of smallish part, but she played the part as a protective mother to Goel, who is Thrall, and he is, of course, baby Jesus, goes off in the river near the end, and gets picked up. That's the very end. I will just say that, I don't know, I suppose I'm still going through it, so I'll get towards that point. Let's see, we got Blackhand, Goel, Garona, Lothar, King Lane did a fine job, really. I can't remember the name of the actor, but he did fine for what he was doing. Nothing mind-blowing, but he was... the role, he's played that role quite a few times, so I feel like he's had experience doing it, and he was doing fine. You also have his wife, the Queen, who had a small bit role with her interactions with Garona. Didn't really get too much payoff from that, because Garona, spoiler, towards the end, ends up having to kill King Lane, but it's not from her corruption of Gul'dan, or her doing herself. Basically, Gul'dan sort of like controlled her to kill King Lane, but that was actually done in the throne room. In Warcraft, the movie, it's done whilst they're actually on Azeroth, but they're sort of like outside of Stormwind. They're in the orc main encampment, and they're being surrounded by orcs, and Blackhand is corrupted completely with fell magic, forcefully so by Gul'dan, who just turns him into this like berserking warrior. He says, I'm just going to give you all this fell magic against his own will, and just turn him into this warrior. And he was going to go and kill King Lane anyway, so King Lane told Garona to actually kill him, so that, you know, they can't steal the honor away, and that she can carry on living, so that she can go on and hopefully help the humans later on, because they're all going to get killed anyway, so she may as well get the kill and then be respected by the orcs that they leave her alive. So her dagger's in the back of King Lane. Lothar manages to pull the body out. He actually has a fight, because you think he's going to... He comes in there with a griffin. You think he's going to pull out King Lane just in the nick of time and get out. But King Lane's already dead by this point, but at least get the corpse. But the Black Hand actually grabs the griffin's foot and then slams it to the ground. And then they have another mock Garak. I feel like I'm saying that wrong, but whatever. Get the first part right, mock. And yeah, they have a fight, but it's very short between Lothar and Blackhand, and Lothar wins it and then gets to walk away and come back with King Lane, and then he talks to Khadgar saying that it was Garona's dagger, the dagger that was given to her by King Lane's wife. So I thought there was going to be more of this kind of, when King Lane's wife finds out, she'll be more spiteful towards Garona or have an agenda to kill Garona. We might find out about that later on in the next movie, because it basically ends very open-endedly, like one of the most open-ended movie endings I've ever seen. Like I said, it went very quickly, and in the cinema I was thinking, I try to calculate sometimes how long it's been, and I think, alright, well they've got about this much time to sort of wrap it up and have this fight, but I kind of like kept forgetting the actual lore of Warcraft and the fact that Gul'dan is still alive in Warcraft 2 and all of that kind of stuff. So he doesn't really die, but you feel, because he's so pinpointed as the bad guy in this movie, that for most normal moviegoers, they would want some sort of like resolution, like a death to the bad guy or something like that, so they can say that ties up the end of the movie, but it doesn't. It basically is a ceremony regarding the death of King Lane. The orcs are sort of like all still together, and they'll want to make a push against Stormwind eventually, but they're still building up to that. And the humans are now having to sort of like get over the death of their king and group up together to defeat the orcs that will be coming. And you think maybe there's another 20-30 minutes of that gonna occur, and then the end of the movie, or Gul'dan has to escape through the portal or something like that, and then you can end it off. But no, it actually just comes up with the Warcraft logo. It's like, oh, okay. Like, I enjoyed it. I wasn't disappointed, but I feel like that might actually put a lot of people off to give it a negative review, or a more negative review than they normally would do, because it doesn't tie it up enough for them. Because they might not be aware of the Warcraft lore and the fact that this very heavily leads into Warcraft 2, because there were 2 invasions. So, yeah. I felt a little disjointed from that, and I know about sort of like the Warcraft lore, so I can imagine that people weren't aware of it. It would be like, oh, it just ended. What happened? Like, isn't Gul'dan going to get killed, or are they going to do something about that? No. And then it has a little bit more at the end where baby Jesus, Thrall, gets discovered at the end of the river in the reeds by a human. And he goes, it was pretty funny, to be fair, what they made him do. You can only do so much with a baby, but it's quite funny. And that leads on to the next part as well, where he gets sort of like captured and, well, without going into spoilers with Warcraft 2, although I say without, I will be going into spoilers, so you might want to sort of like be aware of that, is that the orcs will lose their invasion, and Thrall will be a prisoner in an encampment by a human who is somewhat sadistic and twisted in terms of his personality and attitude towards the orcs, who basically has no sort of like love for them whatsoever and treats them quite poorly in his encampment, because they don't kill all the orcs off. They keep a lot of them alive for labour duty and stuff like that, so they can vote for Jeremy Corbyn. No, I'm just joking. I will say I saw a lot of Grom, and I was very happy with it. He doesn't say a thing, and you feel like they're going to do something with him, but they never really do. They have a lot of moments where he's in a battle and stuff like that, but you don't actually see him fight. He just interacts with another character, and you're like, oh, come on, show us a bit of Grom, show us what he can do. But he's no doubt going to be a big part of the next movie, assuming they're going to be making a next movie, which I think they will be, because they left it so bloody open-ended. So unless it gets absolutely panned or something like that, and they can't justify the costs for making another movie or something like that, I think it's going to happen. It has to happen. And Grom... Why am I saying... Yeah, it is Grom. I always get Grom and Garrus sometimes mixed up, but it is Grom. Yeah, he was in it. He looked badass. He looked just like Grom should look, basically. It was spot on, basically, when I saw him. And I saw him so many times, I thought, he definitely looks different to the other orcs, but they're not doing anything with him, so is that actually Grom? Or not? Because you feel like he would say something. He's just kind of there, going along with it, but he's not sort of like totally committed to the cause yet. So you don't know... You don't picture him necessarily as a bad guy just yet, because you don't get to see him doing too many evil things. So they obviously want to build up more of a sort of depth character for him in the next film, or they don't want to sort of like taint his character too much in this film by making him do lots of terrible things, and in the next film they go, well, whatever he does in this film, we can't feel very fondly towards him or feel much redemption towards his story or have much care, because he did all those horrible things in the first film. You don't really see him do too much. So that's kind of fine in that sense. Little tidbits here and there as I end off this video, as it goes on forever, will be things like... Okay, well, probably one of my favourite bits is Travis Fimmel, Lothar, is kept in a cage just to sort of cool down, because he gets all angry at Khadgar for, again, spoiler, although we are well past spoiler territory, not killing his... Well, he killed his son, not directly, but kind of indirectly, by creating a lightning shield sort of force that separated Lothar from his son, and his son was on the wrong side of the shield, where all the orcs were, so he was going to get killed, because he can't take all of those orcs on. So Lothar wasn't too happy about this, as you can imagine. It was the only thing he's got left in his life. And he was put in a shell, so he shouts at the guard. They had this little moment. He's like, look, come on, just open the cell for me. And the guard just sort of like looks away from him just a little bit more and just sort of like shuffles a bit more. And it's just this little sort of nuance in the character. The guard didn't have much to do. Very little to do, but it's just that little nuance, the way he sort of shook his head was just fantastic. I really liked that. And then they topped it up with a real sort of like a bone thrown to the sort of like the audience that know of Warcraft, where Khadgar comes in and polymorphs the guard. And he says, don't worry, it only works on the simple-minded. And it lasts about 60 seconds. Which is fantastic, because if anyone has played World of Warcraft, it does last 60 seconds on sort of like NPC characters and stuff like that. So he actually turns him into an actual sheep. You get the noise. And also in the movie, there's a Wilhelm scream. I think it's always fun to listen to those. I kind of thought it was a little bit annoying when I first came across that, because then I started noticing all the time, but now it's nice that films sort of still pay homage to that. The Wilhelm scream in a Warcraft movie, not necessarily a Wild West film or a action sort of like shooting gun kind of movie, but it was still in there. They had great sort of like fight scenes. It was kind of hard to tell what was going on. I suppose some of my criticisms of the film would be it wasn't so clear to hear what the characters were saying. Like, they gruffled a lot of their voices, the orcs, to make them sound deeper and more sort of like manly and all that kind of stuff, or orcish. So you didn't actually clearly hear everything they were saying because they were bringing their voices down so much. It wasn't to the level of Bane and or what's the bloody new one from the Star Wars film? Frickin' Ren. Can't remember his frickin' name. I'm gonna get slated for that. Ridley, Finn, Kylo Ren. Yeah, it was Kylo Ren. He's even worse than Bane. Like, if people thought Bane was hard to understand, you listen to Kylo Ren. He's like. It's just like, what the fuck are you saying, mate? Even when I've watched the film back outside of the cinema, it's still hard to listen when you're just isolated and you haven't got any other interference. But yeah, I just like to say that the film was very enjoyable. Go watch it, basically. You will get something out of it. I'm almost certain of it, especially if you're still watching this video up until this point. If you're not, then you wouldn't be watching the film anyway. So there you go. It's a great movie. It has a lot of throwbacks to the original Warcraft, with some changes here and there. Khadgar was pretty great. He was a bit of a comic relief character, but he was likable enough that you sort of like enjoyed his performance. Medivh didn't die like the same way he should have done in the lore and stuff like that. So there's little few things that were kind of wrong, but I'm not going to hold it back too much because some of it I feel like I don't know if the film was a PG-12 or anything like that, but there are some bits where, for example, when Lothar's son gets killed, you can clearly see that Black Hand is going to stab him with his claws, but it blacks out to like another part where it just shows his face or something like that. Again, it's that kind of thing how movies get around, sort of like the 15 or 18 certificate on cinemas, is they just sort of like black out to another scene or a close up on the face as the killing blow is made. So, you know, Medivh is supposed to have his head chopped off in Warcraft lore. So that didn't happen, because I don't know how they could really have that happen. And you could black out, but then you go back to the headshot of his head just sticking off, the corpse and the spine and the blood spurting out. I don't see it getting the PG-12 then, so I can understand what they did there with certain things. They had a little cool moment towards the end. I kind of didn't like it in a way, but I like that they tried. It's the clay golem. It's essentially, again, another throwback to Warcraft style where you have animated golems. For example, in Warcraft 3, you got the battle golems, you got the rock golems, these kind of creatures where they're powered by magic. And you essentially have this in Medivh's room where he's turning into a demon, or he's letting his demonic side out, and he powers up this clay golem, which has been inanimate for the whole film up until this point, and then it becomes essentially as close to an infernal as you can get without it being an actual infernal. And you know the infernals, they're the big fiery sort of like rock golem kind of characters. Yeah, it was a bit of a throwback to that. So I like that they did it, but I thought it was a little bit silly. But I won't let much get to me in this film, and I'll definitely look forward to seeing it again. I've never really gone back to see a film again in the actual cinema. I'll be most tempted to do it with this, but that means going outside of the house again, so I probably won't do it. But I do look forward to seeing the movie again when I can get round to it. So there you go. There's my review. It's my impressions. I definitely enjoyed the movie. Like I say, the armor, the sound, the settings, the environments were great. The Orc Towers, you sort of saw so many little sort of like Easter eggs that were just great. You know, they were very close to Warcraft 3. They looked just like the models. Stormwind looked fantastic. Absolutely amazing. The Griffin, the flying, Dalaran. I know Dalaran was a bit of an odd one. I don't quite understand where Dalaran stands in the actual official lore for Warcraft 1. I'm pretty sure people have a problem with it floating. It shouldn't have been floating by that point, but, you know, I'm pretty sure it shouldn't have been. But whatever it was. And that looked amazing. You know, they did a good job, really, with just sort of like the world itself, building it up. It had lots of throwbacks to Goldshire. Well, there's only a lot. I say lots. There's a lot of throwbacks in general to the Warcraft. You saw Blackrock Mountain. You saw Goldshire, Northshire, that kind of thing. Obviously, Stormwind. Several different areas. They didn't get into too much, but I suppose they can do that in future movies if they get that far. What I really want to see is Illidan, but we won't get to see him for a while. But let's just say that Medivh turns into a bit of a demon, and he looks pretty Sargeras-like, and I was just thinking, he looks pretty good. I'd tap that. No, I'm just joking. But if they could do that with him and make him look that much like Sargeras, they could probably pull off a pretty good CGI Illidan. And that's something I want to see, a story about Illidan just kicking ass. Maybe next film, but most likely, if they stick to this and the way that they open-ended this, it has to be Warcraft 2. They can't just skip to Warcraft 3. They can't do that. People just be like, what the hell? It has to be Warcraft 2, the way it goes, but maybe I'm wrong. You guys let me know in the comment section below whether you're going to see the film, whether you're not going to see the film, your reasons for doing so or for not, and if you did see the film, let me know what you liked about the film, what you didn't like about the film, just your experience in the cinema. That's always fun to listen to. Alright then. I'm amazed if anyone is still listening to this by this point, because I've actually gone on for 33 minutes now. And I was trying to be short with this, but this is me being short. So, yeah. Hopefully you still enjoyed it. And if you did, then make sure to thumbs up the video and share with others so that they can see it and enjoy it, maybe. Maybe they won't enjoy it. Either way, like the video or dislike the video regarding your opinion. And please let me know your opinion on what you think about the movie. Alright then, guys. This is WTii. Take care, and I'll see you later.